Good morning. I'm the
Good
Reverend
morning.
Heidi Barham, and I am on the board of God Before Guns, as well as the pastor of Ledgewood Christian Church in Novelty, Ohio. And I want to welcome everyone, including the Reverend Sharon Risher, to our next installment of Courageous Conversations, which is a series of digital conversations that we started as a means of keeping the subject of gun violence prevention at the center of our attention, in spite of the COVID-19 pandemic and the quarantines, which have caused such major disruptions in our daily lives. But before we get started this morning, I would just ask if we could pause for a moment to honor the passing of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and to remember the lives of civil rights icons such as John Lewis and C.T. Vivian, and the lives of so many who have been lost in just this year. Names we have come to know and hear often, like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. And we remember Jacob Blake even as he continues to recover from his injuries. So let us pause for just a moment. Started in the wake of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in December of 2012. God Before Guns is a multi-faith coalition of individuals and faith communities that are working to reduce gun injuries and deaths. And it's clear to see that our work is not done. Our work is driven by the vision of a nation in which our faith in God and each other elevates the sanctity of life above the fears that lead to a society armed against itself. And it is our commitment to continuing that work that these courageous conversations are being brought to you. During the course of our conversation this morning, we want to invite you to place any questions you may have in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to get to as many of them as possible as time permits. So with that, I am extremely excited and honored to welcome my friend and our special guest, the Reverend Sharon Risher, who is a self-proclaimed accidental activist.
Oh, man.
Who lost her mother, 2 cousins, and a childhood friend in the mass shooting at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, back in June of 2005. And it was back in November of this past year that I had the privilege of meeting Reverend Sharon, who is the author of the book For Such a Time as This, Hope and Forgiveness After the Charleston Massacre. And if David would be so kind as to show our slide, because as technology would have it, I can't share my screen. But we do have a photo from that day, and I just want to say that most, if not all of us, were moved to tears as Sharon shared the story of her journey toward finding forgiveness for the young man who took the lives of 9 people, including the pastor of the church where her mother and family members were members. But in addition to being an activist and an author, Reverend Risher can now add subject of an award-winning documentary to her resume.
Man.
Produced by the New Yorker magazine, the film Quiet No More, The Struggle of the Reverend Sharon Risher was named Best Short Documentary at the Bronze Lens Film Festival Awards in Atlanta, Georgia. So let me just start by saying, Reverend Risher, congratulations
Thank
on
you.
such a prestigious award.
Yeah. I tell you what, Heidi, since being with y'all last year into now, things seems to continue to roll. And Heidi sent me a beautiful prayer this morning. Well, not a prayer, but it was God talking to me through one of her devotions. And I would be remiss, and I just want you to listen to this. Give me a couple of minutes, because I need each one of you to hear this morning, because this really has really put out there my life since June 25th. It starts up, my glory in you. Hardships, pain, suffering, precious one, bring them all to me. I will gladly give you comfort. I will also make myself known in a way you have never seen before. When my son healed the blind man, my glory was revealed anew to him and to all who knew him. For this reason, it is my delight to change pain into healing, joy into gloom, dark into light. So look to me with expectations. Look to me with hope. I can repurpose your pain to exhibit my care for you. I can use your suffering to show my healing power. Dear one, I long to take away your pain and distress in a personal display of my glory. But your deliverance is for the sake of others too. For when you recognize and proclaim my work in your life, so will they. They will see my glory. I had to share that because when Heidi shared that with me this morning, I'm like, wow. Thank you, God, for sending those words through her this morning, because that really is about what my life has been about. Before 2015, I was going along with my life, thought that I was doing all that God had called me to do. I was working as a trauma chaplain. I had friends and co-workers in Dallas, even though I didn't have family. And I felt like I was doing what God had called me to do. And then that hot summer's June 15th, 2015. Oh, you got me all confused. June 17th, 2015. I can't even begin to really give words to all those kind of emotions. I mean, it was just like somebody took a sledgehammer and slammed me in my chest. But like the reading that I just read, even through all of that pain and destruction and confusion and all of that, God continued to reveal God's self and the different things that would pop up for me. Even in the midst of yelling and screaming at God, God continued to pinch me and show me the route that I would have to take. My family didn't understand. My children didn't understand. Friends. And even I didn't understand, but I knew that I had to be obedient. I knew that because of my faith and my relationship with God, that the things that I was feeling in my heart to move me, I knew that was of God. And if people in my family didn't understand, even when I didn't understand, I had to obey. So getting involved with the gun violence prevention movement just seemed like the natural thing after that. Because before that, I didn't pay attention to gun violence in America. I just didn't. I didn't own a gun, never wanted a gun. I was never around people I felt that carried arms. And then every town invited me to speak. And from that one event, I'll never forget, it was Shannon Watts and Schumer and all these different people, Lucy McBath, all of this. I had my speech. Of course, they helped me to write it, and I was so nervous, I was shaking. But the words and the emotions that came out of my mouth that day, I knew then that I had to speak up. I've never been a shy person, you know. So even in school, coming up, I was always good student, but would she shut up? Because I always had something to say about something. So that quiet no more is on a whole nother level. That quiet no more. It's just not about, you know, it's about really rising up and finding your voice.
Mm-hmm.
Not to keep that voice in the inside of you. Not that you have to yell from the rooftops, and sometimes we have to do that, but to be able to bring that voice out of you, to give you an outlet, to be able to voice those things that are in the inside of you that will be able to help someone else. And that's what that quiet no more, the struggles, what that film was all about. Going from yeah.
And yet, in spite of you being able to channel your pain and your grief into your activism, there are so many others who come out on the other side of tragedies like this and are unable to do that. And so as you even think about your own family, how you have risen out of that tragedy, how has the rest of your family fared in all of this?
Well, I'm going to tell you, I have lost 2 siblings since my mother was killed. My sister Esther died in 2017, and then my brother died in 2019. They had had some medical problems, but the effects and the devastation of my mother's death, emotionally and physically, I believe their bodies just couldn't handle all of that. Those 2, they just was not able to handle that. And people need to understand that grief manifests itself physically and emotionally, where it could cripple you. And if you have medical conditions already, your body is, if you don't have that fight,
Mm-hmm.
that fight to get a little, I don't even know how to say, because you never get past it. But if you don't have that internal gauge to say, I'm going to be able to get past this, you could end up, your life can end in death. It really can. And I don't think people really understand that about that kind of grief. I think people think, well, you know, you grieve, you cry, and you move on. I just don't really think they understand the devastation of that kind of an event that could really just tear your family apart. So now it's my sister Nadine, who's the baby, and then myself. We're the only 2 left out of my mother's children. And I'm going to admit that we have not had more than 5, 6 conversations since my mother's death. It really caused a big schism in our family.
And that's one of the tragedies that people don't often realize, that
yes.
There's so much secondary trauma, even beyond just that initial tragedy of gun violence that results in an injury or a death. Just the relationship issues, the functionality of being able to get up and go to work. Because you left your role as a trauma chaplain in Dallas and have now found a new role in life. But not everybody finds that role. So,
and that's it found me. I didn't find it. When I left Dallas and left my job, I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no idea. I had been through so much. I had been dealing with a broken ankle in the midst of grief. I couldn't find it in myself to want to bring or say anything to anybody, where my job was to be and walk with families in some of the most devastating times of their lives. There was nothing in me that I could share, and I knew that. And if you can't walk along and really be able to be authentic and to help people, then you're not doing your job. That's the way I look at it, and I couldn't do my job. So yeah, we families, you don't understand all of the ripple effects, and it never stops. And that's the thing about it. It never stops. You know, yes, Charleston was a national, internationally thing that happened. But when we're dealing with just everyday things,
absolutely. And
it's still the grief, the devastation does not stop. I say, the more you have loved somebody from the deepness of your heart, the more your grief is going to be.
Absolutely. And we are living in a time where our nation is in a constant state of mourning and grief. We have one question that came in already, and it says, we've lost our inspiration for justice with the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And we think about all the other names of people who we have lost in just the last few months in this season of pandemic and protest and political pandemonium. So the question is, who inspires you to do the work that you're doing? And who are other gun violence survivors who strengthen your resolve because you have endured and kept going?
Ooh. So let me say this. All of the people, the icons, John Lewis, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, their lives have opened the doors for us. So they might not be here physically, but our job is to continue what they have started. They have laid out everything for us. So we have to be our own sheroes. We have to say, you know what? I feel like I feel right now, but it gives me more motivation. That's what happens when all of these things happen. I'm angry and sad and don't want to do anything like everybody else. But give me one more day on this earth, Lord. Give me one more day, and I promise that I'm going to do something to help. And it doesn't have to be big things. And I think that's what people get kind of, you know, it's like, you got to be big time. The little things that we could do. Lucy McBath is a shero of mine. I could call Lucy. Most times she answers the phone, and I could get to talk to Lucy because she's a very busy person. But there are survivors. DeAndre Yates, who spoke at the Democratic Convention, who was a survivor. Her son is paralyzed. So we have a group of people out of the survivors that we all get together once a month or so, and we talk, and we could relate to each other. We could cry, we could pray in an informal kind of way. And these ladies, I leaned on them. But of course, you know, as a person of faith, I don't even have to tell you that I go straight to God. Point blank. When I'm mad, when I'm yelling, when I'm screaming, God just sits there and let me rant. And then says, okay, this is what I need you to do. And then okay. But we can allow ourselves, y'all, I'm telling you, to yell at God, even use cuss words every now and then. And God will allow you to get all of that out. And I'm telling you, God is bigger than anything we can imagine. So there is nothing that you could say or do that's going to make God turn away from you. And that's the thing with this pandemic. We have to rely on the faith or spirituality or whatever it is that we have that gives us motivation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So there's a follow-up comment to that question, and it was, please count yourself in when you talk about Sheroes, because we finally remember your visit with us in Cleveland, and you've made a difference in our resolve. And I am just personally grateful that I can count you as a friend and to know you. But we have another question that I think is really critical to the work that you have done, that was enumerated in your book as well as in the documentary. And the question is, can you articulate how your forgiveness of your mother's killer has impacted your trauma narrative today? And have you shared it with others whose loved ones were murdered?
Okay, so I've talked about forgiveness a lot. Forgiveness does not negate what happened. Forgiveness, even though some would say is an instant thing, if you're a Christian, that you should automatically be able to forgive because God forgives us, and all of that is true. Here again, God allows us to come to a reckoning and realization on our own if you're seeking that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're not seeking to forgive, it doesn't matter. But if you're seeking to forgive, this forgiveness isn't about that. The forgiveness isn't about the man that killed my mother and all of the forgiveness was for me to be able to function. Because without that forgiveness, I was not functioning. I was angry. I was depressed. That sledgehammer that I talked about in the beginning stayed with me. It was so heavy, I couldn't breathe. And all I knew was, God, help me. And the more I asked God, the more I realized that we have to forgive for ourselves. For ourselves. It isn't about what happened. And even with everyday people, all of us have had things in our lives that have hurt us. And sometimes there is not enough in us to confront who that is. But once you start to reckon with yourself and self-realization and understand that I can't live like this. And with the process of getting closer and asking God and reading and be able to have that person that you could talk to, you could get to a point where the forgiveness wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that you saved yourself.
Mm-hmm. I've shared this comment in sermons at a time that holding on to unforgiveness is like drinking rat poisoning, waiting for the other person to die.
Yes.
It's so bitter and toxic, and it does paralyze us, and it keeps us from being able to do the work that we have been called to do.
Yes.
And so I am grateful that even in sharing your story through your book and now through this documentary, which, if at all possible, David, if we could even show the slide of Quiet No More, which
man.
For those who have not seen the documentary, you can go to the New Yorker magazine website and you can view the documentary. It's only 26 minutes, but it is a powerful story as it follows you not only from just that moment when you found out about what happened with your mom, but even glimpses into the trial and how your family has dealt with this, and pulling up some old hurts and some old wounds that even in dealing with that to help you manage through this process of grief and forgiveness. It is a powerful witness for all of us who have endured some form of tragedy or loss and are trying to figure out, how do we get through to the other side? There's another question that has come up. How can we help people, the victims, the families and friends of gun violence during this pandemic? People are so sad and frightened right now that sometimes just a silly story or a joke isn't enough. What do we do to help with this grief and tragedy, even in the midst of a time of pandemic?
Prayer changes things.
Amen.
Sometimes we want to do something physical. We want to donate to something, or we want to, saying, like you say, tell stories or whatever. But a survivor of gun violence need to be able to have a space where they can trust who they're with, and to be able to know that they can pour their hearts out without judgment. Yeah, that's my first thing of pray. And always, every town and God before guns, always, people always, all of these different groups that we have that cater to gun violence prevention. We can always make donations if you can. I keep saying I'm gonna start a foundation, but it's so much hard work. It's a lot of work. But my prayer, my vision is for survivors, is to be able to have a place where, because you're affected financially. If you have kids, you have to deal with kids. So I want to be able to have an avenue where if something happens, they don't have to worry for a month or two about how their rent is being paid. And people give advice and all of this, but when you're in something like that, you're in a financial tailspin. And if you don't have life insurance, people don't realize. You see all of these GoFundMes, and that hurts my heart when people have to do a GoFundMe to bury somebody. And so that's my vision, but I don't know. Maybe that's going to be, so I'll be on the board and somebody else do all of the hard work, and I try to raise money, and I hate begging for money, but I'll beg for money for something about that. So that's what I see, being able to help survivors, like especially in the beginning of a tragedy or someone dying because of gun violence. You really need a lot of care and support. Yeah,
absolutely. And your voice is so critical as a survivor, as someone who has persevered, and one who is not afraid to let your voice be heard. And as we are looking at this culture of hate and violence and lax gun laws, one of our questioners has pointed out, it is a fatal combination. I mean, we need look no closer than the recent protests in Portland, Oregon, and in Wisconsin, and to see how just the proliferation of guns and this call to arm yourselves. I mean, it's just irresponsible that political leaders are saying, arm yourselves. It's almost as if they're calling for more of what we've seen that has pushed us to this point. And so it's critical that we push to change the laws. We can recognize that it was a culture of hatred that led to this massacre that lost the lives of so many in Mother Emanuel Church, especially your mom and the church pastor, and a place that should be a sanctuary for relief from the outside world.
The Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. I mean, we have incidents continuing and continuing. And with the administration that we have now that plays up to this kind of rhetoric, We have to fight even more. You know, hate with a gun is deadly. And
Absolutely.
we're at a place in America where so much of this is coming out. People are bold in their racism, and how we have to be really, really careful about where we are. Let me give you an example how crazy I got last night. We were at an outside restaurant, my son and I. Cracky crabs, but the food was good. It was a young white gentleman, had on all black. He kept walking back and forth. And I turned to my son. I said, something's not right with this young man right here. And he's making me nervous. My son got up and went and talked to the manager. And the manager asked the little fella, you know, that he needed to leave from around that immediate area. And I have not had that happen to me that I can remember so fresh. But last night, I tell you, I got nervous. It was just something about this little young man that sounded the alarm in the inside of me.
And that's
to have to live like that.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody should have to live like that. I'm always, and I've let my guard down a little bit. I don't know what it was about. Like I said, he had all black on. He had his hair almost cut in the little bowl thing, like you know who. And there's a whole group of people now calling themselves the bold head because of the rhetoric this fool sprouts. And I'm telling you, these young people, there is something wrong in the fabric of America when we have all of these young kids sprouting and being radicalized. There is something wrong. I tell you,
Well, I think it is fair to say that there is still much for us to be prayerful about.
Yes.
There's still much for us to speak up and speak out about, and to speak truth to power. We are in a season, as I said, where we are on high alert, that at any given moment, we are just another George Floyd away from another incident, another Jacob Blake, another Breonna Taylor. The names and the list goes on, and we can't afford to let our guard down.
No. And to be passive. We can't.
Absolutely.
We can't. I know we're talking to our choir. You know what I'm saying? We're talking to people who are like-minded. Right. But we have to continue to speak to the choir in our communities, in our churches, in our families. I have a nephew who's 29 years old. He has never voted. If I could have been close to him, I would have popped him in his head. Like, boy, what is wrong with you? I said, you better go register the vote, and you better get all your little homies to vote right along with you, because every vote is going to count.
Absolutely.
I don't want to hear you complain about the man, when you're not exercising your right to vote, because it will help. It might not help you today, but you have a son that in the future, what we're doing now is going to be able to help support him and to let him know that he can get to do anything he wants, and he doesn't have to be afraid of a police officer.
Absolutely. And with that, I know we are actually at our time for this morning, and I want to honor your time, and I appreciate you being here with us today. It is critical for us to vote, to exercise that right that so many have given their very lives for us to be able to do. It is critical that we are counted in the numbers. Census 2020, we are right at the deadline, 11 more days that we can count in the census. so that critical dollars are coming into our communities that will allow us to address so much of what is wrong in our society right now. And so I want to encourage everyone, if you have not been counted, get to census2020.gov as soon as possible. I want to leave us with this last question, comment. What is your take on the police use of deadly force when there are little to no consequences that they're suffering, particularly when we look at who the victim is versus who the police officer is?
Ooh, that's a heavy one because, you know, I have always respected our law enforcement because regardless of what, and so some people might disagree with me, we need law enforcement.
Absolutely.
That's what they're there for. Now, I understand that the defund the police, that doesn't mean take away. That means trying to figure out another way of using some resources. I want to see, but our law enforcement comes from a long history of their duty and what they could do and the power that they have. There has to be a restructuring of how our law enforcement officers are trained. There has to be more psychological testing in these academies and new recruits. Because if we keep getting the same kind of people on our law enforcement, then we're going to continue to have this kind of stuff. And I hate that. When that thing happened to George Floyd, all I could do was holler when I saw that. And I'm getting teared up now because we don't have to live like this.
Amen.
We have to let our law enforcement know, though. We need you, but we don't need you to kill us.
Amen.
We need you to be able to have some kind of compassion in your heart to understand that there is another way you might be able to do this. And that black and brown bodies are just as precious as anybody else.
Yes.
So, on one hand, I know what we need. On the other hand, we have a problem. But we must be able to use our voices to let our community policing know and all of that we can't do without you. But we need you to do some things different. Absolutely. We need these officers to be held accountable. You know, I hated that all the rioting and everything that happened. But sometimes America doesn't seem to understand nothing until you start messing with the money. And you start messing with money, and then you got a whole new ball game.
And I think we are at a point in time where things are just bubbling up and boiling over.
Yes.
And it is important for us to use our voices, to use our votes, and to continue to engage in courageous conversations like we have been able to have today. And so in behalf of God Before Guns, I just want to say thank you, Sharon. We love you. We appreciate you so very much. And
always. I have peeps all over the place. So I have my Seattle peeps. I have my Cleveland peeps.
Well, we are looking forward to you coming back.
I see you as my family, Chris and David and you, Heidi. And make sure you tell Reverend Hedgeman I watch her on Things Have Changed. I love having church with Bethany.
Amen. I know there's some Bethany folks on the line, so I am sure.
Yeah, well, you make sure you tell Reverend Hedgeman that I love her. And she inspires me so much to keep going.
Well, you inspire us, Sharon. That is for sure. So
thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to, again, say thank you to everyone who has tuned in. We know that this is not only the Jewish holiday for Rosh Hashanah, so we may have some of our viewers who would not be able to attend. But if you have other friends, please know we are going to have this video available on our website and Facebook. We are just so grateful. There's a comment that just came in to say thank you for sharing your wisdom. You are a blessing, Sharon. We are just staying prayerful for you and the work that you are doing.
Yes.
And look forward to hearing what will come in the days and weeks ahead. So I want to invite everyone, please keep your eyes and ears peeled in your emails and on our Facebook page and on our website for upcoming Courageous Conversations. We know we have to keep the discussion going because we have a lot of work left to do. So with that, I want to say thank you again. Blessings to you all, and we look forward to seeing you on our next conversation.
Peace.
Peace to you.